When did you first become involved in the research aspect of the JFK assassination?
On JFK assassination investigation, I went to Dallas on assignment for a magazine right after Kennedy was shot to do a story on the breakdown of security, and that got me interested in it. When the Warren Commission came out and I reviewed all the 26 volumes, I became a critic. As an FBI investigator, I was rather insulted by the conclusions that were unwarranted by the facts, and I then started writing about the Kennedy assassination in Ramparts magazine.
What do you feel from a research aspect would be your most important contribution to helping to clear up the case as best it can, bring it into a little better focus?
On the John Kennedy case, I think perhaps my major contribution was finding out that W. Guy Bannister had an address that was the same address used by Lee Harvey Oswald in the streets of New Orleans and handing out pro-Castro literature. I discovered that when went down to help Jim Garrison in his case in 1967, and I think that nest of intrigue and intelligence activities at 544 Camp Street really is the nexus of the investigation.
Why is this issue so important after 3 decades?
When you have a president of the United States shot in the streets, you have in effect a coup d'etat, and I think we don't want to become a banana republic where power changes hands through assassination. I think, therefore, it's just critical to the continuance of democracy to solve these crimes.
Now, after the Oliver Stone film, there was an outcry for release of the files, and a lot of people give me the same answer. And I was curious, in your point of view, which of the withheld files would you most like to see?
Well, I frankly am not optimistic about what's going to come out in the files. I think that anything sensitive, anything that goes to the heart of who did it and why and who sponsored it, I think, number one, that either has not been reduced to paper and never got in any file, and number two, if it did, it's long gone through an Ollie North type shredder.
Do you think there's any hope of resolving the case in any sort of a conclusive manner, even if it's just obstruction of justice in the cover-up? Should we have a special prosecutor and another investigation?
Definitely, special prosecutor, that's the way it has to go. I know that's going to take some doing, but it's the only independent way to get it done, and without being subject to a lot of politics in the doing.
And you were involved early on in the 60s with Ramparts, and there was a lot of stories about harassment and the suspicious deaths. Did you ever yourself receive death threats or harassment in any way in connection with this case or RFK or any other work that you did?
Well, I've received anonymous calls, but I never considered that anybody that calls anonymously and threatens your life is really serious. I always put that in the nut file. I've had my rooms bagged in New Orleans. I've had funny things happen, which undoubtedly had something to do with COINTELPRO type operations against me. But I'm still alive. I suppose I have to account for my longevity in some terms, and I usually say, well, I have somebody else start the car in the morning.
I know this is kind of jumping around. Do you think that if these files show anything interesting and some of the researchers who are knowledgeable feel that there's something there, do you think there's a need for the president to get involved here? Do you think he should take a stand publicly on this issue?
I think that the president is going to have to approach it from the standpoint of saying there's enough information available to warrant a new investigation. I don't think he can publicly take sides in that investigation or come to any conclusions about it. He has to let it run its course. Certainly, by even doing that, however, he will indicate where his true sentiments lie.
Now, I know in your service with the FBI, and I know this was the time of J. Edgar Hoover. I assume it was the 50s to early 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there was a problem when you came out. There was the Turner case, so to speak. When you were with the FBI as an investigator, what sort of counterintelligence assignments, and was that under Sullivan's division?
Uh,
Domestic?
yeah, Bill Sullivan was the head of domestic intelligence, known as Division 5. Uh, Although most of my work was in the criminal area in the Bureau, because I had a technical background, I was trained in wiretapping and bugging and black bag jobs, which were the burglaries. So I got involved in a lot of the COINTELPRO kind of activities, including breaking and entering, planting microphones without proper authorization, that kind of thing.
Now, I know Hoover at some point in time publicly said that he was stopping these black bag jobs, and I know that you were sent to sound school, so to speak, and learning this sort of a trade. After Hoover's public pronouncement about this, did you receive assignments to continue these kind of operations?
Well, Hoover's public pronouncement about discontinuing those type of operations came after I left the Bureau. It came around 1964 when the Bureau came under increasing fire about their illegal activities. So I was not even in the FBI at the time that he decided to abstain.
Now, I know you've written about the right-wing Minutemen, Birchers, neo-Nazi, KKK, and these types. Did you investigate any of these sort of groups while you were with not counterintelligence, the criminal aspect with the Bureau?
No, we didn't investigate any of these type of groups. Most of the Bureau's activities in those days were directed against the black nationalists, whom they considered a threat of violence, and not against the right-wing violent organizations. Any investigations of the Klan, for example, that had any substance to them took place after Bobby Kennedy became Attorney General.
In a nutshell, I know it's probably very complicated, but your battle with J. Edgar Hoover that they call the Turner case, what happened there?
Well, the Turner case was that I had become increasingly silently critical of the FBI and the way the priorities of the director were squandering resources. For example, he was doing nothing on organized crime. In fact, he didn't admit that the mafia existed, and we were sent out to accumulate statistics, piling up big numbers against the small-time criminals, the human tumbleweeds. There was an exaggeration of the communist menace at the time. The Communist Party was decimated with FBI informants who became the largest single source of party funds through their dues that were paid for by the FBI. There was a cult of personality around the director that was very destructive to any objectivity in the agency. And I just decided I'd been silent too long, and I decided to go public with it. And that, of course, involved retaliation from J. Edgar Hoover because I was a first agent, and maybe up to this point the only one who poked the tiger from inside the cage. And I wrote to Congress asking them, look, don't take my word for it. Here are the leads. Investigate it. This agency needs investigation.
Now, long after you had left the FBI, you wrote a book called The Fish is Red, which has recently been released as Deadly Secrets Updated. I've read it. It's a wonderful book. Now, at the time, it seems to be a kind of an underground classic now that it's reissued. Was there an effort, do you think, by the intelligence agencies to discourage its publication, or was it blocked, or did you have trouble promoting it?
Yeah, the Fish is Red was published in 1981 by Harper and Row. We had not originally had Harper and Row as our publisher. Everything went fine until it got in their hands, and it was transferred over by New York Times Books. There's two ways to kill a book. One is to not publish it. The other is to just let it die and not do anything to promote it. I think Harper and Row opted for the latter course and really didn't do much to promote the book.
You don't know if they were intimidated in some way, though?
I have no particular knowledge that they were intimidated, but we knew going in that Harper and Row had a reputation for some affinity for the CIA at times.
Okay, one more question and then the final one. Do you know, or would you like to see the documents surrounding the Bay of Pigs incident and Mongoose and those sort of operations then? released in this new declassification with the JFK Files Act, and will that help to shed light on other dirty tricks and possibly the JFK assassination?
Definitely. I think well, my belief is that the whole JFK assassination scheme came right out of the assassination plots against Castro involving not only the CIA but the mob, both with mutual interest to get back into Cuba. For that reason, I think that these documents concerning the Bay of Pigs, and particularly the post-Bay of Pigs era, where Kennedy ordered intensified but lower profile operations against Cuba, are going to be very important to what our knowledge of what happened in the assassination.
Now, one follow-up before I hit the final question on that is, it seems that they talk about the wilderness of mirrors a lot, and there's so many disinformation stories about the JFK assassination. It seems obvious to me that people either related to the intelligence agencies or in the intelligence agencies were diverting to a Castro did it sort of thing, kind of the Jack Anderson theory now. Do you think that's evidence of intelligence agency, not involvement in the assassination necessarily, but deliberate disinformation to point the finger to start another invasion of Cuba?
Absolutely. And I believe that from the start, the very fact that Oswald was chosen as the fall guy in this operation to take the rap for it, and immediately was on national television that night, his voice was heard saying, I am a Marxist. This was when he was posturing as a pro-Castroite in the streets of New Orleans in 1963, months before the assassination. I think that the buildup of Oswald and the usage of him as a Castro agent was intended to provoke an invasion of Cuba. It didn't work that way, but at least Kennedy was gone, and the hostility towards Cuba continued. One of the reasons Jack Kennedy was killed is that he was on a secret track to resume negotiations with Cuba and to bring about a rapprochement with that country, which was as an anathema to the CIA and the anti-Castro exiles as the idea of withdrawing from Vietnam.
And my final question is, back to the wilderness of mirrors. This case is just so complicated that a lot of times the press, the media really can't make sense of it, and a lot of times when they do interviews, the complaints from the researchers are they don't know the meaningful questions to ask. Now, if you were interviewing yourself, if you were in my position, what question would you wish they would ask you?
On the John Kennedy assassination, I would say go with what is plausible and not what is one implausibility piled upon another. For example, this magic bullet theory. What's plausible about it? Nothing. Is it conceivably possible or remotely? Maybe. But why do we even bother with that when the plausible thing is John Kennedy was shot from the back and he was shot from the front? There was at least two shooters.
Great, okay.